Architecture of absolute value, the anatomy of true love and true integrity. What comes to mind when we hear the word love? Probably something sung by poets, mystics, and romantics, right? But what if I told you that this is only the outer shell, and sometimes even an empty shell? Not always, only sometimes. If we treat human emotions not as a chaotic liquid, but as a dynamic hierarchy of values, we can establish a strict transactional definition. Yes, I know, it sounds cynical, unless we remember that love is something far greater than mere romance, much greater, and at times even something entirely different. So, true love is the conscious willingness to sacrifice the absolute peak of one's value hierarchy for the sake of the beloved. Conscious and willingness. Both words matter. Within this formulation, love is not just a feeling or an emotion. It is a system of value verification. The true strength of love can be measured only by the maximum price a person is consciously willing to pay for it. The logic is uncompromising, regardless of the nature or the object of love. Love is not measured by words, gestures, promises, symbols, or the aesthetics of a relationship. It is measured by what a person is willing to lose. Dynamic scale of sacrifice. The definition above scales flawlessly across the entire spectrum of human experience. It adapts to the nature of both the lover and the beloved, altering the value of the sacrifice while preserving the same underlying logic. The meaning of a sacrifice is determined by the significance of the value being surrendered. The higher its place in the hierarchy, the stronger the confirmation of love. Let us examine how this structure manifests across different spheres of life. 1. Love in theology. God loves humanity so profoundly that he sacrifices his only begotten Son. This is the maximal possible sacrifice within a religious coordinate system. What is given up has no equivalent. Abraham's love for God is so strong that he is consciously willing to sacrifice his own only and long-awaited son, Isaac, on the altar. This is not merely the willingness to lose something precious. It is the willingness to lose the meaning of one's own life, one's continuation, one's hope, one's future. 2. Parental love. Good parents love their children to such an extent that their own physical survival becomes a secondary value. They are consciously willing to sacrifice their comfort, their resources, and their lives to ensure their children's survival. We see this in small things. A parent gives up rest, personal time, career opportunities, and financial stability. We see this in extremes. A parent shields a child from danger with their own body, gives away their last food, works themselves to exhaustion so the child can live better than they did. 3. Patriotic love. A true patriot possesses a deep love for their country. The authenticity of this love is revealed in the willingness to risk not only one's own life, but, in periods of existential crisis, even the lives of one's children for the preservation of the homeland. Patriotism is not flags, anthems, or slogans. It is the willingness to pay the price when the country demands sacrifice. History knows countless examples of people who gave everything, from property to life, for the preservation of what they considered the highest value. 4. Love for one's work. In intellectual and creative pursuits, in sports, those who love their craft, artists, scientists, athletes, sacrifice their youth, personal lives, financial stability, and time for the singular pursuit of discovery, creation, or victory. The story of Marie Curie alone is enough, but there are thousands like her. Artists who lived in poverty for the sake of art, athletes who destroyed their health for victory, scientists who lost their families for research, doctors who infected themselves intentionally to test, study, and validate treatments. 5. Childlike love. We see this even in the purely personal world of a small child, who lives without complex philosophy and prays to a higher power to take away his most beloved toy if that means his mother will recover from illness. For an adult, this toy may be nothing more than a piece of plastic, but for the child, it represents the peak of his current world. Offering it is the absolute limit of his capacity for mutually beneficial exchange. It is comparable to the widow's mite in the Bible. She gives only 2 small coins, yet it is everything she has, while others give far more but only as a small fraction of what they possess. It is therefore reasonable to assume that romantic love follows the same structure of sacrifice as any other form of love. If love is the conscious willingness to give up the peak of one's own value hierarchy, then romantic love must be confirmed by the same logic. It does not receive a separate definition simply because it is accompanied by emotions, passion, or the aesthetics of a relationship. Without this willingness, what is usually called love becomes a mutually beneficial exchange, a convenient transaction based on the alignment of interests, habits, temperaments, and expectations. It may be pleasant, it may appear stable, it may even last for years, but by its nature, it is not love. It is a contract that holds only as long as the alignment of interests remains unchanged. Why is the mere alignment of interests not love without conscious willingness to sacrifice? Because interest can stop aligning. Job loss, bankruptcy, the need to abandon career plans, caring for a sick partner, relocation. All of these change the structure of benefits. Where harmony once existed, asymmetry appears. One partner needs support, and the other must decide whether they are consciously willing to sacrifice part of their future to preserve the relationship. It is no coincidence that the most famous vow of love, the marriage vow, states the formula of sacrifice openly: for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. This is not a poetic tradition and not a cultural ritual. It is a direct question. Are you willing to give up part of your comfort, freedom, and prospects for this person when the structure of benefits changes? A vow is not a promise of feelings. It is a pledge of willingness to pay the price, whatever that price may be. After all, words carry no weight. Anyone can say, "I love you," for any reason or none. The value of the beloved is confirmed by the painful price of what one is willing to surrender for that person, object, or idea. Resolution of the paradoxes of sacrifice. When love is defined strictly through the lens of sacrifice, philosophical paradoxes arise. The paradox of joyful sacrifice is psychological in nature. When a person deeply loves something, giving up anything else for the sake of the beloved often brings a sense of peace or even joy. For example, if a parent skips a meal to let the child eat, they do not feel robbed, they feel satisfied. But this is only an apparent paradox. Does this make the sacrifice invalid? No. However, food or sleep cannot be values in themselves. They are merely instruments for sustaining life and its quality, and a parent does not die from skipping one meal or even several, nor do they lose their mind from a few sleepless nights. There is no sacrifice of value here, only a hint of willingness to make one. No one will remember that 7 years ago I gave you my burger. In contrast, a real choice is always painful and almost always leaves the aftertaste of loss. The paradox of colliding values is always a genuine and profound conflict, and it arises when two truly strong objects of love collide, creating a moral version of Schrödinger's cat. Consider a patriot who is also a parent during wartime. For simplicity, let us leave aside questions of parental responsibility for the child's moral development and focus solely on physical safety. If the parent sends their child to fight, they prove their love for the country by sacrificing their child. They are a true patriot, but they fail the immediate test of protecting the child's safety. And if they flee with the child, they prove their parental love by sacrificing their right to be called a patriot. Before the crisis, a person exists in a state of quantum superposition, potentially both an ideal parent and an ideal patriot at the same time. The crisis acts as the observer that collapses the wave function of moral possibilities and forces the ambiguity to fall apart. Two peaks cannot simultaneously be both value and currency. They either do not conflict, in which case there is no choice itself, or one turns out to be primary and the other becomes the payment. The crisis simply reveals which one was the true summit. Midnight test. Imagine a person standing at noon in the middle of an open field, with no trees and no shadows, under clear, cloudless skies. He loudly declares that he is not afraid of the dark. Is he afraid? There is no way to test this except to wait until midnight, when complete darkness arrives. Until that moment, the cat is both alive and dead. He remains in this quantum superposition until the box of the midnight test is opened and the wave function of his confidence collapses. This brings us to the question of integrity. Do we truly love what we claim to love? And this approach to love reveals a broader, vital truth about human character. Any genuine moral choice is possible only when our values and our immediate personal interests are in direct collision. It is remarkably easy to maintain the illusion of integrity in daylight. If honesty protects our reputation and ensures our career advancement, if loyalty supports the stability of our personal life, and kindness brings social approval so neighbors invite us to barbecues, if charity grants us tax benefits, then our values and our personal interests align perfectly. Are we doing good deeds in such conditions? Certainly, yes. But how can we know how high our interests stand in the hierarchy of our values, and whether they are the true drivers behind these actions? The true weight of a value system can be measured only at midnight, at the moment when doing the right thing guarantees personal loss and leaves us no opportunity to hide behind the alignment of interests. Midnight is the point where telling the truth will cost us our job or status, where forgiveness requires the complete destruction of our pride, and where staying with a partner during illness demands the exhaustion of our health and freedom without any immediate return on investment. We mistakenly take the absence of temptation for the presence of virtue. This does not mean that virtue is absent at all. It only means that it has never been placed in conditions where it could either manifest or fail. And this is why we pray, "Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil," which is essentially a plea that our environment not force the collapse of our moral wave function. And this is humility, the understanding, and perhaps the fear, of what we might discover when the sun sets, the transaction occurs, and the evil we fear may turn out to be ourselves. It is the complete opposite of boasting at noon. True integrity, like true love, is an expensive virtue. It requires the willingness to let go of part of oneself, whether comfort, pride, or safety, so that the primary value may live. So if the formula does not cause pain, the value has no confirmed weight, It is merely a preference that can be abandoned when the price becomes too high. Zaven Vardanyan, 2026.